Now back here in Korea, and it was a tale of two very different stories for Korea's two biggest political parties in Wednesday's by-elections. The ruling party surprised many by sweeping to victory in 3 of the 4 vacant seats. The main opposition party is left licking its wounds after failing to win a single race. Park Ji-won reports.
It was a surprise victory for the ruling 새누리 Party. The Conservative Party ended up winning 3 of the 4 parliamentary seats up for grabs in Wednesday's by-elections. A liberal independent candidate took the remaining seat. It was a night to forget for the main opposition party, which failed to secure a single victory, even in its traditional stronghold districts. Seoul's Gwanak-B, a traditional liberal hotbed, was won by the ruling 새누리 Party's Oh Shin-hwan with over 43% of the vote. The liberal vote was split, with the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy's Chung Tae-ho earning some 34%, while independent Chung Dong-young, who used to be a key man in the main opposition party, finished with more than 20% of the votes. Jungwon district in Seongnam, Gyeonggi-do province went to the ruling 새누리 Party's Shin Sang-jin in an easy victory. He locked down more than 55% of the votes, while the main opposition's Chung Hwan-seok could only muster 35%. In Incheon's Ganghwa-B district, the 새누리 Party candidate An Sang-soo, former Incheon mayor, beat the NPAD's Shin Dong-gun 54% to 42%. The nightmare was complete when the NPAD also lost in Gwangju's Seoggu-B district, a constituency which has been in the Liberal Party's hands for 13 straight elections. Independent Chun Jung-bae, former justice minister during the Roh Moo-hyun administration, which has been in the Liberal Party's hands for 13 straight elections. Independent Chun Jung-bae, former justice minister during the Roh Moo-hyun administration, took more than 52% of the votes. The final voter turnout stood at 36%. That includes ballots cast during a 2-day early voting period last weekend, and it's slightly higher than the 33% turnout in last July's by-elections. The rise in turnout has been attributed to the extra interest sparked by the recent bribery scandal. The 4 seats were mainly vacated by the dissolution of the pro-North Korea Unified Progressive Party late last year. The newly elected lawmakers will have 1 year in the job until the general elections next April. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now to the latest on the aftermath of Saturday's devastating earthquake in Nepal. Aid has begun to reach remote regions near the capital Kathmandu. The UN says the response is broadening to include hard-hit areas where landslides have earlier been reported, with at least 200 people feared to be missing in those areas. Now, those landslides have strained rescue efforts in the aftermath of the 7.8 magnitude earthquake, which has thus far killed more than 5,000 people, confirmed, and injured more than 11,000. Now, the death toll continues. And we start with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's speech to the US Congress. Despite intense pressure from inside and outside the United States, Abe again chose to ignore calls for him to apologize directly for Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women. While he shirked that responsibility, Abe did offer great sympathy for the American lives lost during the war. Son Jung-in has more.
There was no shift in his stance. During a 45-minute speech to a joint meeting of the U.S. and Senate at the U.S. Congress on Wednesday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe expressed deep remorse over his country's role in World War II, but stopped short of offering a clear apology for such atrocities as the sexual enslavement of women from Korea, China, and other nations.
Our actions brought suffering to the peoples in Asian countries.
Focusing more on the future of the U.S.-Japan military alliance than Tokyo's past wrongdoings, Abe did not use any apologetic expressions during his landmark speech. Instead, he said that armed conflicts have always made women suffer the most. The remark is being seen as an attempt to make sexual slavery look like just one of many human rights violations that happened during war. It was a clear contrast with the apologetic tone Abe struck about U.S. suffering during the war.
I offer, with profound respect, my eternal condolences to the souls of all American people that were lost during World War II.
Many critics had urged Abe to use the speech to make a public apology about Japan's wartime atrocities to alleviate concerns that he is trying to dilute past official statements of remorse by his predecessors. The absence of an apology is expected to cast a shadow over the prospect of Seoul-Tokyo ties improving anytime soon. 손정인, 아리랑 뉴스.
Coming up today, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe fails to acknowledge or apologize for Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women during his historic speech to a joint session of the U.S. Congress. Despite the swirling allegations of bribery involving several of its senior members, Korea's ruling 새누리 Party secures victory in Wednesday's by-elections, winning 3 of the 4 seats up for grabs. The main opposition party fails to win any. Plus, the Korean government charters a special flight to quake-hit Nepal to bring stranded Koreans back home. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Thursday, April 30th here in Seoul. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. And we start with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's speech to the US Congress. Despite intense pressure from inside and outside the United States, Abe again chose to ignore calls for him to apologize directly for Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women. While he shirked that responsibility, Abe did offer great sympathy for the American lives lost during the war. Son Jong-in has more. Now back here in Korea, and it was a tale of 2 very different stories for Korea's 2 biggest political parties in Wednesday's by-elections. The ruling party surprised many by sweeping to victory in 3 of the 4 vacant seats. The main opposition party is left licking its wounds after failing to win a single race. Park Ji-won reports.
Earning some 34%, while independent Chung Dong-young, who used to be a key man in the main opposition party, finished with more than 20% of the votes. Jungwon district in Seongnam, Gyeonggi-do province, when candidate An Sang-soo, former Incheon mayor, beat the NP-80 Gwangju Seoggu-B district, a constituency which has been in the Liberal Party's hands, turnout stood at 36%. That includes ballots cast during a 2-day early voting period last weekend, and it's slightly higher than the 33% turnout in last July's by-elections. The rise in turnout has been attributed to the extra interest sparked by the recent bribery scandal. The 4 seats were mainly vacated by the dissolution of the pro-North Korea Unified Progressive Party late last year. The newly elected lawmakers will have 1 year in the job until the general elections next April. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, as a result of the ruling 새누리 Party's impressive showing in the by-elections, the Park Geun-hye administration has been given a mandate to push ahead with its reform agenda. The ruling party had aimed to secure at least 2 out of the 4 seats, but going one better means they have added to their majority at the National Assembly. They'll be looking to forge ahead with their labour market reforms and plans to shake up pensions for public servants. The main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, faces a more uncertain time following its thoroughly disappointing performance given the circumstances. The Liberal Party was relatively in a favourable situation, as the ruling party, as we just heard, has been mired in high-profile allegations of corruption in the run-up to these by-elections, with the NPAD failing to win even a single seat despite this backdrop. Many observers say party divisions will likely deepen. The party's leader, Moon Jae-in, is due to make a statement on the election results at 10 a.m. Korea time. In economic news, Korean manufacturers' confidence for this month strengthened to its highest level since last April, but it was largely the big conglomerates that drove up the sentiment. The outlook for small and mid-sized firms remained unchanged. Shin Se-min has the details.
This month, confidence among Korean companies hit a record high since last April. The Bank of Korea says the business sentiment index for the month rose to 80, up 3 points from a month earlier. But a reading below 100 still means pessimists outnumber optimists. The bleak outlook also comes on the back of improved business sentiment for large firms, which saw their index go up by 5 points to 86 this month. The small and mid-sized companies remain the same.
Low global oil prices benefited the large firms, creating positive sentiment despite the slow economic growth. But it wasn't enough to make small and mid-sized firms feel that advantage.
The central bank also attributes the higher business sentiment among big firms to a record low key interest rate and the government measures to put in place to shore up the economy. Analysts say, however, that there is no guarantee that these favorable conditions will continue in the long run, setting off alarm bells even for conglomerates which are less vulnerable to circumstances outside the country. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The much talk about rate increase by the US Federal Reserve could be further away than many had anticipated. Wrapping up a two-day policy meeting in Washington, the Fed didn't signal any shift from its current policy, just saying that it will raise its record low interest rates when it's reasonably confident inflation is moving towards 2%. Analysts say the statement suggests the Fed won't look to raise rates until September at the very earliest. The Fed's statement came hot on the heels of disappointing government data, which said the country's GDP expanded just 0.2% in the first 3 months of the year, well down from the 2.2% increase in the fourth quarter of last year. The slowdown has been blamed on the harsh winter weather, falling global crude prices, slower hiring, and the rising dollar. The Fed's interest rates have been near 0% since late 2008. Now to the latest on the aftermath of Saturday's devastation. And the Korean government has sent a special plane to Nepal on this Thursday to bring its stranded citizens back home. Dozens of Korean tourists are currently stranded in Nepal, including 44 high school students. Seoul's foreign ministry says that a Korean air flight departed for Kathmandu at around 3 a.m. Korea time, that's about 3 hours ago, and will return at around 6:30 p.m. this evening. The plane is carrying emergency food, water, and other relief goods for the Korean embassy in Nepal to give to the remaining Korean nationals there. The ministry also plans to dispatch a second group of rescue team workers on Friday and send $500,000 worth of relief goods.
Today on a school day, and around 1,000 teenage students are at the Seoul Arts Center to watch Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew as a ballet performance. The students are not ditching class or going on a school field trip. They're participating in a free semester program.
Coming up on Primetime News, results are pouring in for the parliamentary by-elections here in Korea. 4 seats are up for grabs, with each district hotly contested. While holding a joint press conference with the U.S. President, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe offered no apology for the country's World War II sexual enslavement. And Korean business sentiment hits a new high, but the concern now is that it's mainly large companies leading the improvement. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Primetime News on this Wednesday, April 29th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Zhe. Thank you for joining us. By-elections were held from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time to fill 4 parliamentary seats and elect some local councillors as well.